My name is Eric, and what happened to me last summer is still something I can't explain. Even now, months later, I still wake up some nights trying to piece together the missing hours. It happened during Labor Day weekend in Ocean Crest, Maryland, one of those beach towns that turns into chaos once the sun goes down. Loud music everywhere, crowds spilling onto the boardwalk, drunk tourists stumbling between bars like it was all part of some giant ritual. My best friend Derek worked in event promotion. He'd built a surprisingly big reputation in the East Coast electronic music scene over the last few years. Every month, he organized these massive DJ events at upscale clubs from Baltimore to Atlantic City. And because we'd been friends since middle school, he always got me and a few of our old hometown friends into his shows for free. That weekend was supposed to be his biggest event yet. A famous international DJ was headlining. The venue had sold out days earlier, and Derek insisted I come down early to help him set up. I drove down with Derek and our friend Lucas, arriving at the venue around 6 in the evening. The club was ridiculous. 3 stories tall, rooftop access, LED walls behind the stage, private VIP cabanas overlooking the dance floor. While Derek disappeared into work mode with his team, Lucas and I did what any 2 idiots with unlimited free alcohol would do. We started drinking. Fast. By 8:30, we were already deep into whiskey and vodka. By 10, I was floating somewhere between pleasantly buzzed and absolutely reckless. Still functional, still aware, but definitely not making good decisions. The event itself was incredible from what I remember. The bass was so loud it felt physical, like your organs were vibrating. The entire place pulsed with light and movement. People packed shoulder to shoulder, shouting over music that was way too loud to ever talk over. Around midnight, Lucas and I wandered to the upstairs bar. That's where we met them. 2 women. One introduced herself as Sienna. The others said her name was Camille. They were stunning, polished in a way that immediately stood out. Not flashy, not trying too hard, just effortlessly put together. They looked expensive. That's the only way I can describe it. Everything from their clothes to the way they carried themselves screamed money. At first, I assumed they were way out of our league, but they approached us. That alone should have raised alarms. Instead, drunk confidence made us feel invincible. We started talking, and strangely, the conversation was good, really good. No shallow club nonsense, no forced flirting. We talked about travel, architecture, books, random things you don't usually discuss while standing inside a nightclub. I remember thinking how weirdly refreshing it felt, like I'd suddenly stumbled into an entirely different kind of night. After maybe 40 minutes, Camille handed me a drink, a vodka soda with lime. "Catch up," she said with a grin. I laughed and downed it. Lucas did the same. That was my mistake, because about 15 minutes later, everything changed. At first, it felt like regular alcohol hitting all at once. Then it became something else. My limbs started feeling heavy. Not tired heavy, disconnected heavy. Like my arms and legs weren't fully responding to me anymore. Walking became strangely difficult. My thoughts were clear enough to recognize something was wrong, but my body felt delayed, almost detached. I looked over at Lucas. His face had gone pale. "You good?" I asked. His blinks blowed slowly. "Yeah, just really drunk." But his voice sounded off, slower than normal, like he was forcing each word out. Sienna suggested we get out of the club. "Too crowded in here," she said. Camille smiled. "Our place is nearby." Normally, I'd never agree to that, but my judgment was slipping fast, and whatever was happening to me seemed to make rational thought feel distant. So we followed them. The walk along the beach is one of the last things I remember clearly. The ocean air, the sound of waves, the strange sensation that my body was moving on autopilot while my brain lagged behind. At one point, I remember stumbling. Sienna caught my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Almost there," she whispered. Eventually, we reached a massive beachfront property. 3 floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, private dunes leading directly to the water. It looked less like a house and more like something a billionaire would rent for the summer. Inside was even stranger. Everything was minimalist and spotless. White marble floors, abstract sculptures, walls lined with modern art. No family photos, no personal items, nothing that made it feel lived in. Lucas and Camille appealed upstairs almost immediately. That left me alone with Sienna. She stepped closer, close enough for me to smell her perfume. Something floral, sharp, almost medicinal. She smiled, then leaned in to kiss me. And that's where my memory ends. Not fades, ends. Like someone cut the film. Nothing after that. No fragments, no flashes, just darkness. The next thing I remember was waking up in broad daylight, lying face down in wet grass, my head punding so hard it felt like my skull might split open. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I just stared at the dirt beneath my face, trying to understand why everything smelled like mud and gasoline. Then I slowly pushed myself up and realized I was wearing someone else's clothes. A gray t-shirt 2 sizes too big, cheap jeans that weren't mine. No wallet, no phone, no keys. Only my shoes remained, and both were soaked through. I looked around. I was lying in a patch of overgrown brush beside an empty roadside parking lot. No beach, no houses, no people, just woods stretching endlessly in every direction, and a faded highway sign nearby that made my stomach drop. Raven Hollow, 63 miles north. I had somehow ended up over an hour away from Ocean Crest, with no memory of how I got there. And then, I heard footsteps crunching through the brush behind me. I turned and saw Lucas stumbling towards me, wearing clothes that weren't his either. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. He looked at me for 2 long seconds before speaking. "Eric." His voice shook. "There's blood on my hands." For a second, I just stared at him. Lucas stood there in oversized cargo shorts and a faded black sweatshirt that clearly belonged to someone else. His hands were trembling. And he was right. There were dark reddish-brown stains smeared across both palms. Not fresh enough to drip, but definitely blood. My stomach dropped. "What the hell happened?" I asked. He shook his head rapidly. "I don't know." That was the worst part. The absolute sincerity in his voice. He looked genuinely terrified. I rushed over and grabbed his wrists, inspecting his hands closer. The blood wasn't coming from any visible cuts. His skin was unbroken. It had gotten on him somehow. Transferred. And that realization made my chest tighten. If it wasn't his blood, whose was it? Neither of us said anything for several seconds. The silence of that empty roadside felt unnatural. No passing cars, no birds, nothing. Just the distant hum of power lines somewhere beyond the trees. "We need help," I finally said. Lucas nodded. We stumbled toward the road together. About a quarter-mile down, we spotted a gas station sitting near the edge of a highway exit, the kind of place that looked forgotten by time. 2 pumps, a flickering "open" sign, 1 rusted ice freezer out front. Inside, a middle-aged man stood behind the counter watching a tiny television mounted in the corner. He looked us over with immediate suspicion. I probably would have done the same. 2 disheveled guys wearing random clothes, covered in dirt, stumbling in half-panicked. I explained as calmly as I could that our phones had been stolen and we needed to call someone. After a moment of hesitation, the salary slid his cell phone across the counter. The first number I called was Derek. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Then Lucas called his older brother. He answered immediately. The second he heard Lucas's voice, he started yelling. "Where the hell have you been?" Apparently, Derek had been trying to reach us for hours. By 3 in the morning, he'd assumed we'd gone home with the women. By sunrise, when neither of us answered calls or texts, he'd started panicking. Lucas's brother told us to stay put. He was already on his way. While we waited, I asked the cashier if we could use his bathroom. Inside, I finally got a proper look at myself. I looked awful. Pale, eyes bloodshot. A bruise was forming along my collarbone. and around my left wrist was a faint red mark, circular, as if something tight had been wrapped there. I rolled up my borrowed sleeve. There was another mark higher on my forearm. 2 tiny punctures, barely noticeable, like needle marks. My stomach twisted. When I stepped back out and showed Lucas, his face went white. He had the same marks, same arm, same placement. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We both knew what it looked like. About 40 minutes later, Lucas's brother arrived. He took one look at us and immediately said we needed to call the police. So we did. 2 county officers showed up 20 minutes later. To their credit, they listened. At first, we told them everything. The club, the women, the beach house, the blackout. Waking up 63 miles away in strange clothes, the blood, the marks on our arms. One officer, a heavy-set guy named Morrison, scribbled notes while the younger one asked questions. But the more details we gave, the more skeptical they became. "Sounds like you boys got blackout drunk," Morrison said. "No," I snapped. "This wasn't alcohol." He shrugged. "You'd be surprised what people do and forget." I showed him the puncture marks. He barely glanced at them. "Could have been insect bites," he said. Lucas showed his bloody hands. Morrison pointed out there was no proof it was even blood. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. Then Lucas remembered something. "My phone," he said. His brother had access to his Find My Phone app. He pulled it up immediately, and to everyone's surprise, the phone was active. It was pinging less than 3 miles away, in a commuter parking lot off the highway. The officers agreed to check it. We followed in Lucas's brother's truck. When we arrived, both our phones were lying side by side in the middle of an empty parking space, placed neatly, like someone had set them there intentionally. Neither was damaged, neither had been turned off, and somehow both still had over 70% battery. That changed the officers' expressions. Not enough to fully believe us, but enough to unsettle them. I unlocked my phone. There were dozens of outgoing texts sent between 1 and 5 a.m. to Derek, to my parents, to coworkers, to people I barely spoke to. And every message sounded exactly like me. Natural, coherent, perfectly normal. One text to Derek read, "Crashing at a buddy's place. Don't wait up." Another to my mother, "Long night, but I'm good. Love you." Another to a girl I was seeing casually, "Can't sleep, thinking about you." The timestamps made no sense. Whoever had sent them had been keeping up appearances, making sure no one looked for us. That's when the fear really hit me. Someone had my phone, unlocked it, knew enough about me to imitate how I texted, and had deliberately bought themselves time. The police finally agreed to investigate. We drove back to Ocean Crest and tried retracing our steps. Hours later, Lucas and I found the beach house, exactly where we remembered. Same black iron gate, same massive windows, same private dune access. We rang the bell. An elderly woman answered. Gray hair, robe, confused expression. I carefully asked if Sienna or Camille lived there. Her face hardened immediately. No. I explained that 2 women had brought us there the previous night. She stared at us for a long moment, then said something I'll never forget. "This house has been empty all summer. My son owns it. He's in Singapore." My blood ran cold. She led us inside to prove it. The place was completely bare. No furniture, no sculptures, nothing. Just empty rooms with hardwood floors and dust gathering in corners. It was impossible. I knew what I'd seen, what we'd both seen, but the house was vacant. The investigation went nowhere. No fingerprints, no surveillance footage. The club cameras conveniently lost power around the time we left. Our wallets turned up 3 weeks later in a storm drain 15 miles away. Cash gone, cards untouched. To this day, neither Lucas nor I remember what happened during those missing hours. But 6 months later, something happened that still makes me sick. I got a text from an unknown number. No message, just a photo. It was me and Lucas unconscious, lying side by side on a tiled floor under harsh fluorescent lights. Both of us shirtless, both with IV lines in our arms. Stamped in the corner of the image was a date and time. 3:17 a.m., Labor Day weekend. Attached beneath it were 4 words. You were lucky once. I called the number instantly. Disconnected. Police traced nothing. Burner phone. Dead end. Lucas moved to Arizona 2 months later. He refuses to talk about that night. As for me, I haven't been back to Ocean Crest since. And every Labor Day weekend, right around midnight, I still get an unknown text. Always blank. Always from a different number. Always accompanied by a single attachment. A black photo. Too dark to make anything out. Except, if I turn my screen brightness all the way up, I can just barely make out 2 women standing in the darkness, watching, waiting, and smiling. My name is Kara Whitmore, and this happened 3 years ago on a drive I've never fully gotten out of my head. I still think about it every time I'm on an empty road after dark, especially when headlights linger a little too long in my rearview mirror. At the time, I was 26 and living just outside Macon, Georgia. One Saturday in late July, I drove out to Briar Creek, Alabama for a barbecue thrown by one of my college friends, Lena. She'd recently bought a small house with a fiance in a quiet rural town about 2 hours from where I lived. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where front porches still had rocking chairs and people actually waved when they passed. The party was exactly what you'd expect. String lights in the backyard, country music drifting through cheap Bluetooth speakers, too much food, too many drinks, kids chasing each other through the grass with sparklers while the adults argued over whose turn it was to watch the grill. Honestly, it was one of the best nights I'd had in months. Work had been exhausting, and I needed the break. I should have stayed the night. Lena offered several times. But I'd promised my manager I'd be in early Sunday morning to help prep inventory for a store-wide clearance event. So just after 10:30, I said my goodbyes and started the drive home. That decision still bothers me. The first half hour was fine. The roads were mostly empty, and I had music playing low through the speakers, windows cracked, warm summer air drifting through. For a while, everything felt peaceful. Then I noticed the headlights behind me. At first, there was nothing unusual about them. A silver sedan, probably just another late-night driver heading the same direction. But after about 15 minutes, I started paying closer attention. No matter how fast I went, it stayed the same distance back. No matter how much I slowed, it adjusted perfectly. Not closer, not farther. Always there, always matching me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Long night, too much caffeine earlier, my imagination filling in blanks. Still, to test it, I sped up, about 10 over the limit. The sedan accelerated too. Then I dropped well below the speed limit. It slowed with me. That was when the real wave of fear hit. The road I was on was a narrow 2-lane stretch surrounded by dense woods. No houses, no businesses, no traffic, just darkness on both sides. And that car. I shifted slightly to the shoulder, giving it plenty of room to pass. It didn't. It stayed exactly where it was. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I remember glancing at the clock, 11:18 p.m., still nearly 90 minutes from home. Then I saw a left turn ahead, a tiny side road cutting through what looked like farmland. Without signaling, I took it sharply. It was a test, no reason for anyone to follow me there. 10 seconds later, the silver Maxima turned too. That was the moment panic set in. I knew, no doubt, whoever was driving that car was following me. My mouth went dry instantly. My heart started hammering so hard I could hear it. I pressed harder on the gas. The sedan stayed right behind me. I considered calling 911. But out there, reception was spotty. And if they answered, what was I supposed to say? A car is behind me? I worried they'd dismiss it, or worse, that wasting precious seconds explaining would distract me. So I kept driving, trying to think, trying not to panic. Then my dashboard chimed, the low fuel warning. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because sometimes your brain reacts to fear in stupid ways. Of course my gas light would come on right then. My car was old, a 2011 Honda Civic that had more problems than I could count. And once that gas light came on, there was no telling how much longer it would actually run. Sometimes 20 miles, sometimes 5. I checked my phone for nearby gas stations. One appeared 8 miles ahead, open 24 hours. It was my only option. I punched the accelerator. The sedan matched me instantly. At this point, I could make out more details. It was an older silver Nissan Maxima, mud splattered across the lower panels, one headlight slightly dimmer than the other. The windows were too dark to see inside. I drove faster. The road stretched endlessly ahead, trees blurring past. My gas needle dipped lower and lower. Every sound my car made suddenly felt ominous. The slight engine rattle, the hum of tires, the faint whistle of wind through the cracked window. Everything sounded like warning signs. Then, just as I started thinking I wouldn't make it, I saw it. A glowing gas station sign in the distance, bright red letters cutting through the dark like a lifeline. I nearly cried. I whipped into the lot hard enough that my tires squealed. Before the car even fully stopped, I threw it in park, grabbed my bag, and bolted for the station entrance. The bell above the door jingled as I stumbled inside. The cashier, an older man with thick glasses, looked up in surprise. I rushed to the counter and blurted that someone had been following me. He immediately looked out the window. The silver Maxima had pulled to the edge of the lot, engine idling, not moving, not leaving, just sitting there, watching. The cashier reached for the phone. "Want me to call the sheriff?" Before I could answer, the Maxima suddenly peeled away, tires screeching. It shot back onto the highway and disappeared into the darkness. Relief hit me so fast, my knees nearly gave out. The cashier called the sheriff anyway. A deputy arrived about 20 minutes later. I told him everything: the matching speeds, the side road turn, the gas station, the waiting outside. He took notes and promised to keep an eye out, but I could tell from his expression he thought I was exaggerating, probably just some bored kid messing around. That's what he suggested. I wanted to believe him. I really did. After filling my tank, I drove home shaken but safe. For the next few days, I convinced myself it had been nothing, a creepy coincidence, an overreaction. Then, 4 nights later, everything changed. I was home alone. It was just after midnight. I'd fallen asleep on the couch watching television when a sound outside woke me. An engine igniting, idling, directly in front of my house. Still half asleep, I looked through the blinds, and there it was, parked across the street beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp. A silver Nissan Maxima. Mud splattered along the sides, one dim headlight. The windows were black, too dark to see through. The engine remained running, and as I watched, the driver's side door slowly opened. Someone stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothes. And then they started walking toward my front door. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen behind the living room blinds, staring as the figure crossed my lawn. Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to do something. Lock the doors, turn off the lights, call the police, run. Instead, I stayed rooted to the floor, watching. The man moved slowly, deliberately, like he had no reason to rush, like he knew exactly where he was going. And somehow that calmness terrified me more than if he'd been running. My heart slammed against my ribs as I dropped to the floor and crawled backward away from the window. The first thing I did was kill the television. The room went dark instantly. Then I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. The dispatcher answered. I whispered my address as quietly as I could. "There's someone outside my house," I said. "He followed me a few nights ago. He's here now." The dispatcher's voice stayed calm. She told me officers were on the way and instructed me to lock myself in a room immediately. I sprinted upstairs, locked myself in my bedroom, and shoved my dresser against the door. It wasn't much, but it felt better than doing nothing. Then I crouched beside the bed, phone pressed to my ear, trying to listen. For several long seconds, there was nothing. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps against my front door. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not frantic, controlled, like he expected me to answer. The dispatcher asked if I could still hear him. Before I could answer, the knocking came again. Same rhythm, same unnatural patience. Then, silence. I held my breath, listening, waiting. That was when I heard footsteps on my front porch, slowly pacing, back and forth, boards creaking beneath his weight. He wasn't trying to break in, not yet. It felt like he was deciding something. The dispatcher assured me deputies were less than 10 minutes away. 10 minutes. It sounded like forever. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard something that made every muscle in my body lock up. The metallic scrape of my front doorknob being tested. Once, twice, then harder. The sound echoed through the house. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from making noise. The knob rattled violently, then stopped. A long silence followed, and then came the crash, glass shattering downstairs. I nearly screamed. "He's inside," I whispered. The dispatcher immediately told me to stay hidden. Officers were almost there. Downstairs, I heard movement, slow footsteps crossing my kitchen, then my living room, heavy, measured, unhurried. Whoever this was wasn't panicking. He knew he had time. The footsteps reached the staircase, then began climbing, one step at a time, each creak louder than the last. I looked wildly around my room for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on the brass lamp beside the bed. I grabbed it and held it like a bat. My entire body was trembling. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. Silence. Then came breathing, low, steady, right on the other side. I could hear it clearly. He knew exactly where I was. The doorknob turned, once, twice. The dresser shifted slightly. Then a voice came through the wood, male, low, almost conversational. "You should have kept driving." My blood turned to ice. It was the first time I'd heard him speak, and something about how calm he sounded made it infinitely worse. The knob twisted harder. Wood groaned in almost lewd crack. The dresser scraped another inch. I raised the lamp, preparing for the door to burst open. Then, suddenly, sirens, loud, close. Red and blue light flashed through my bedroom window. The doorknob stopped moving instantly. The breathing vanished. Then came rapid footsteps retreating down the hall. I rushed to the window. Below, I saw him sprint across my lawn towards the street. He jumped into the silver Maxima and tore off just as 2 sheriff's cruisers turned onto my block. The deputies searched my house thoroughly. The back kitchen window had been smashed, glass everywhere, mud tracked across the floor. They found a partial shoe print beneath the broken window and fingerprints on the frame. For the first time, they took me seriously. One of the deputies recognized the description of the car immediately. The silver Maxima had been flagged in neighboring counties.
It was believed to be connected to multiple home invasions across rural Georgia and eastern Alabama. Always women living alone, always late-night surveillance first, then break-ins days later. My stomach dropped hearing that. I hadn't imagined any of it. The sheriff assigned patrols to circle my neighborhood for the next few nights. I stayed with my sister for almost 2 weeks. And then, just when I thought it was over, the news broke. 3 counties over, police had engaged in a high-speed chase involving a stolen silver Nissan Maxima. The driver crashed into a ditch trying to evade arrest. He survived, barely. His name was Walter Reeves, 43 years old, a drifter with prior convictions for burglary, assault, and unlawful imprisonment. When police searched the trunk, they found zip ties, rope, duct tape, and detailed handwritten notes listing addresses. Mine was on the list, with observations. Lives alone, usually home by 7, lights out around midnight. Reading that made me physically sick. I had been studied, watched, planned for. The sheriff later told me they believed he'd selected victims while driving highways late at night, following women home, learning their routines, waiting for the right opportunity. If my gas hadn't gone low that night, I probably would have driven straight home. He would have known exactly where I lived. No gas station, no witness, no deputy report connecting the vehicle. Nothing. That malfunctioning fuel gauge may have saved my life. It's been 3 years. I moved shortly after everything happened. Different town, different house, security cameras everywhere, motion lights on every corner, and I never let my tank drop below half full. But sometimes, usually when I'm driving at night, I glance into my rearview mirror and catch headlights lingering too long. And for one awful second, I'm back on that empty Alabama highway, watching that silver car match my every move, waiting, studying, following.